Hey there, I'm Paul Rabelais, and welcome to this part 2 of our 6-part series on how a single or unmarried person protects their assets from nursing home expenses and qualifies for long-term care Medicaid. Okay, so 6-part series. Already did the first part, which was the kind of the big picture, the philosophy, what's the idea behind kind of why a single individual would or who would, which single individuals would and should protect what they have from future potential nursing home expenses. This is part 2. It's all about the inventory of the assets and the income, and coming right behind part 2 will be 3, 4, 5, and 6. 3 and 4 will be the meat of this Medicaid eligibility planning. The part 3 will be about the people or the entity that assets get transferred to. Part 4 is going to be all about those asset transfers. 5, maintaining your plan while you're healthy and while you're out of the nursing home. And then part 6 will be the Medicaid application process. So this is an important step of protecting what a person has. And it's about the inventory of the assets and the income. So I want to remind you, I'm a Louisiana lawyer. I help our law firm's Louisiana clients get and keep all of their legal affairs in order. These Medicaid laws, they're federal laws, they're administered by the state. It can differ from state to state, so just be aware of that. If you're in a state outside of Louisiana, things may differ a little bit. In general, the big picture of what we're talking about is accurate from state to state, but as we get into the details, it can vary. Okay, so before we can just protect everything that we have, we need to know what you own. So I want to break it down, and it is really important that you somehow make some record of what you owe, what you own, what your income is, and there's a bunch of different ways you can do that. If you're fairly computer savvy, you can make an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document. If you're not quite as computer savvy, just get out a piece of paper and a pen or pencil and make a list, because you don't want to miss anything, especially if you're going to be working with other people to help you, implement this plan. They need to know. So you need to make a good written list. Okay. So this again is for the single people. There'll be a different video series for married couples, because the rules are different for married couples. And I'm focusing this 6-part series on the single or unmarried person. Maybe it's a surviving spouse. It's common for a surviving spouse to start to worry about losing what they have if they go into a nursing home, because they lost their spouse, and maybe the couple had a plan that they would try to keep each other out of the nursing home. But now that one spouse has died, the surviving spouse is now realizing there's nobody to help take care of that surviving spouse. So now the surviving spouse starts to worry a little bit. So it is a big issue for the single people, or whether they've lost their spouse or been divorced or just never married. Okay, so the first thing, as far as the assets that you own go, we're going to break it down into exempt assets and countable resources. So the exempt assets are assets that you can own, but you're not going to be penalized for owning them. At least you're not going to be denied Medicaid eligibility because you own an exempt asset. And I'm also going to say here that we have, and I would imagine every state has its own Medicaid eligibility manual that is probably thousands and thousands of pages. And I kind of feel like I'm sounding like Donald Trump. Thousands and thousands of pages. And so this is maybe a 10-minute video, and I'm flying through stuff. So there's a lot of crazy types of assets and income that it doesn't apply to most people. So I'm going to hit in general, but if you have a really unusual situation, then you're going to need to look into that. But all right. So when we get back to the exempt resources, the things you can have that will not keep you from being eligible for Medicaid if you go into a nursing home, the main ones. I would say there's 2 mainly: your house and your car. So, and then there's others, there's burial spaces, there's other exempt resources. But it's important to document those exempt resources. The main reason it's important to document those resources is because of estate recovery rights. Because even though your home may be what's called an exempt asset, it won't keep you from becoming eligible for Medicaid if you move from your home into a nursing home. They won't look at your home. However, all states have these estate recovery rights where the federal government requires the states to recover the cost of the nursing home care that your state's Medicaid program provided you out of your estate assets. So when you die, when you apply for Medicaid, if you have a home, that's okay. But when you die, there's the potential or maybe even the likelihood that the state is going to pursue its estate recovery rights by requiring that your home be sold to reimburse Medicaid for what they spent on your care while you were in the nursing home. So for that reason, it's important for you to document all of your exempt assets, and the main ones are your home and your vehicle and burial spaces, and then I could get into some odd ones after that, but those are the big ones. All right, so document that. And then the other things that you need to document what you own are the countable resources. And it's important because if a single individual, a single person, an unmarried person gets sick and they go into a nursing home, if they have more than $2,000 worth of countable resources, they're not going to be eligible for Medicaid. They have to spend or sell and spend those countable resources until they have less than $2,000 remaining. They can't transfer assets out of their name at that time because you're going to be ineligible for Medicaid if you either have more than $2,000 of countable resources or you made any transfers out of your name in the previous 5 years. So documenting now while you're healthy what all of the countable resources is important. Let me go through what some of the countable resources include. So it includes things like your bank accounts. And when I say bank accounts, that means your checking accounts. It means your savings accounts. It means your CDs or certificates of deposit. So all of those bank accounts are countable resources. If you have any bonds, some people own, United States savings bonds or other types of bonds. Those are all countable resources. Our Medicaid manual says cash on hand is a countable resource. Some people keep a lot of cash, in their house, in their safe deposit box, buried in the backyard. Oh, by the way, don't ask your lawyer if it's okay if you bury some cash in the backyard. It's not, it's Medicaid fraud. So that cash on hand is a countable resource. If you have some cash value in a life insurance policy, some people own term insurance that doesn't have any cash value, but many people own life insurance, whole life insurance, universal life insurance, where you have cash value. Yes, you may have a $250,000 death benefit, but you have $50,000 of cash value. You could pull that cash value out and spend it. And since you could do that, Medicaid says that's a countable resource. They're going to count that against you. If you own any mutual funds, any real estate that's not your home, that needs to be documented. Whether you own a piece of rental property or a tract of land, or maybe you own 1/4 of your parents' house along with your other 3 siblings. All of that is a countable resource. It's going to be counted against you for purposes of Medicaid eligibility. You need to document that as part of getting all of your things in order. If you're here in Louisiana and you have the usufruct of property that's not your home, if you're out of Louisiana, forget that. You'll never understand usufruct. But if you do have the usufruct of property that's not your home, you need to document that. That usufruct has value and it's counted against you for Medicaid eligibility purposes. If you own any business assets, whether you were self-employed or you own an LLC or a corporation or an S corporation, those are assets that are countable resources, so you need to document that as part of your getting ready to structure things to protect what you have from nursing home. Any retirement funds, IRAs, 401k assets, any other retirement accounts that you have that you could withdraw, that's a countable resource for Medicaid purposes. Any assets in the safe deposit box, there's a mechanism that when somebody applies for Medicaid, their safety deposit box has to be inventoried. And so anything valuable in there is going to be a countable resource. If you own any shares of stock, whether it's a publicly traded corporation or a privately held corporation, those shares of stock are a countable resource. So as you're starting to see, there's a lot of things that can be a countable resource, and oftentimes individuals will miss if they don't sit down and make a list and go back and rehash what they've done in their lives. They're going to miss it, and it's going to come back to haunt them in the future. So worth taking the time to make that good list of your countable resources. So once your list of assets gets put together and it's broken down into the exempt assets and the longer list of countable resources, now we have some information to work with. And oh, by the way, if you have any debts, that ought to go on your list as well. Medicaid doesn't look at debts in general. They just look at the assets. But when we start developing a plan or a program to one day make you eligible for Medicaid, we need to know what those debts are, because it factors into what you should do to make it easy to qualify for Medicaid in the future. Okay, so that's your asset list in your spreadsheet. Maybe there's 3 columns. There's exempt assets, there's countable resources, and there's debt. Okay, now we move on to the income. And the income doesn't get talked about as much as the assets gets talked about, but it is important to document all of your sources of income when you start to put things together and develop a program to potentially protect what you have in the future. And again, different rules for married couples that are a little more complex. I'll cover that in a different series. But for the single person, in general, the single person has to spend all of their income on their care, even if their assets are protected. More on that in a minute. So the general rule is you've got to use your income. And I'm going to put some examples to this in a minute. But they let you keep what in Louisiana is a $38 monthly personal needs allowance, and then they let you keep out of your income enough money to pay for your health insurance premiums. So let's put some numbers to it, and you need to document all your sources of income. The typical sources of income are things like Social Security, pension income. A lot of people who are in their 70s or so, they're getting pension income. Pension income is not as popular for people who are working now and they're in their 30s and 40s or even their 50s, but there's a lot of people getting a pension out there, and that factors into their potential Medicaid eligibility. So the way the income works for a single person is, let's say a single person has $2,500 of monthly income. They have Social Security, and let's say they're getting a pension. So of that $2,500 of monthly income, Medicaid allows them to keep $38 of that personal needs allowance, and Medicaid permits them to pay their health insurance premiums. So the rest of their income, if they're in a nursing home and if their assets are protected in a way that we'll talk about in parts 3 and 4 of this series, then all that remaining income goes to the nursing home, and Medicaid in general would pay the difference between that individual's income and the cost of the care. Their monthly income was $2,500, cost of the care $7,000 a month. So the individual will have to assign their income to the nursing home. Medicaid picks up the difference. One thing worth noting on that point is if somebody has a lot of income, let's say they have a bigger than normal pension, or they have income from some other source, and their monthly income is $8,000 a month, and they want to protect their assets. Well, bluntly, I'm kind of like, forget it. you have $8,000 of monthly income, and even if all of your assets are protected, you still have to use all of your income towards your care. So if you have $8,000 of income that you can't, quote, get rid of, it's not assignable, and the nursing home costs $7,500 a month, then you're not going to be eligible for Medicaid because you have to use all of your income first. So that person probably doesn't need to go through the effort to try to, quote unquote, protect their assets when they have that much income, and protecting the assets isn't going to do them any good because their income is so high. It covers the cost of that nursing home expense. Now, I get it. Maybe that nursing home expense today is $7,500, and in 10 years, that nursing home expense might be $13,000, and that person's income will still be $8,000 a month. I could see where that person may have a desire to protect the assets because of that potential future excess cost over what the income will be in the future. So another issue that pops up. All right, so this is kind of the homework part of our 6-part series, and then the next 2 parts we're really going to get into the meat and potatoes. The next video is about, what people or entity should assets be transferred to. A lot goes into that, so that's going to be a big one. So this information is really good for single people who want to protect what they have, the middle class. Again, the poor, they're going to qualify. The rich, if they got a stroke a $10,000 check every month for long-term care, it's no big deal. But the middle class is going to get smacked in the face. So this 6-part series is for those individuals who want to protect what they have. It's also for the children of parents, and maybe that parent just isn't comfortable initiating a discussion about protecting what they have, but when the children get that information and they bring it to the parents, and the family together can make an informed decision about how things will be protected and moved into the next generation. Sometimes the children initiating that can be a real valuable part of the family's overall plan. So real important that you share this information. I'm going to put it in a YouTube playlist so that you can share that with other people, or share this video or that playlist with others who may benefit from this information. Make sure you subscribe, the red button, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss anything. If you have any additional comments, write them down below in the comments section. Look forward to 4 more parts of this 6-part series on a single or unmarried person protecting what they have from the nursing home and qualifying for long-term care, Medicaid. We'll see you next time.